So both say we're here on page Ches, and we're up to Nechleku Rishonim, and we're going back to this principle called Ligu de Nachta. So on the left column on page Ches, about, let's say, 2/3 down the column, and it starts Nechleku Rishonim im Omrim Ba'of Migu de Nachta. Now, as we pointed out yesterday, this concept of Migu de Nachta is very foreign to us. So if you tell me that it may or may not apply to an oath, again, I can't analyze that one way or the other. But Migu de Nachta basically means that if you have an animal that's royal mizbeach and you amagdish it as kedushas damim, or alternative, if you have an animal that is not royal mizbeach because it's in a keva and you want to bring it as an ocham, then when you amagdish it, although you and I would have said it's kedushas damim, plain, simple, unadulterated kedushas damim, and you should be podit, yet the chacham say no, you need a mum, and it becomes kodesh b'kedushas guf, even though it's not royal mizbeach. And we said that this migu somehow indicates that inherent in the hakdasha of a behema is kedushas haguf, even in an event that you can't bring it onto the mizbeach. And maybe that's because the psul, the mizbeach, is external. It's not, inherently the animal is subject to hakdasha, and it has what we called yesterday a latent kedushas haguf. That's migu. Do we apply that even to an oath? The Gemara doesn't say one way or the other. Rishonim fight this out. It's a battleground whether we should apply Migu de Nachta to an oath. Okay. Higdish behema lidmei nisachin. Okay. So this is a case which is similar to what we discussed yesterday, where he was magdish an animal such that the damim of the animal after pidyon should be lemizbeach. So the animal itself, let's say, is not royal lemizbeach, but he was magdish the damim lemizbeach. The dmei habehema should go to purchase something, whether it's a carbon or in this case the sock, in this case yayin, for the mizbeach. So nechluku bazeh im omer bazeh migu denachta lekachamim. Shall we apply again this migu and say that even if, let's say, the behema in the worst case scenario could not be royal in mizbeach in and of itself, he wasn't interested in designating the animal as a karban. His interest was that the dmei habehema should go for the mizbeach, which means for something that has kedush saguf.
So why is the behema hektish?
What do you say?
Why is the behema hektish? Even the dominant.
Right, because again, migu de nachta means that if you have something that could be used for the mizbeach, it was royal mizbeach, it was suitable, you could have designated for the mizbeach, but instead you said, I want to designate it so it's damim is the mizbeach, and it comes under that, that beit hashmoshos, that kind of a hybrid situation where it's a kedushas damim, but yet it's a kedushas guf. It's kedushas damim in the sense that we're not going to take this animal that you're being magdish and bring it on the mizbeach. It's only got a kedushas damim. But on the other hand, you designated the damim of this animal from this bear.
It's not everything that's known be the value of the animal for the Mikdash to whatever, to whatever you want to do.
So that's kedushas damim. But here, what we're talking about is kedushas damim that has within it a kedushas mizbeach. He's not saying I'm being magdish the damim. If he was magdish the damim, like in the case of Erech, we're not going to bring a carbon. We're going to force him to pay 30 shkolim or whatever it is for his Erech, but those shkolim don't necessarily go to mizbeach. They can go to fix up the base on Mignos. If you have a crack in the wall. But in the case of nisachim, we're talking about taking the damim, buying yayin, and bringing the yayin as a carbon on the mizbeach. That depends upon me. Yesh min harishonim hasover shebekarban chatos im shina kigon shehifish zachar lechatos nekeva ein omrim bozeh migu de nachta v'gam eino kodesh b'kedushas damim. Okay, I'm assuming this is the Bali Atosis. Let's see, Kuf Ayin Dalit. Oh, it's the Rambam at the beginning of Hilchos Tmura. Okay, so what we're about to learn is a machlokes, the Rambam and the Ravid, about the application or the inapplication of the principle of Migu. What's the case? He was mafresh. Hey, this is a flip side. Until now we've been discussing a person who was mafresh in a keva when he needed a zocha. And we had issues about whether or not we could be poded in a keva and use the money to buy the zocher, or if the nekeva gives birth to a vlad and the vlad is a zocher. Now we're talking about a case in the reverse. There's such a thing as a chatos nekeva. Again, we have to go back to our basic charts over here. Does he have it there?
Mm-hmm.
One of these days you'll photocopy me and expand it. It's probably too small, but does he have a chatas nekeva there?
Yeah.
In what case? That's probably a seira maybe.
For Nazir and Torah.
Oh, wait a second. A Nazir at the end of his Naziris has to bring a korban chatas. And that chatas is in a keva? Does he tell you which animal it is? Oh, so he gives a kizba. Okay. And what was the other case?
Mitzora.
A mitzora. Okay. A mitzora has to bring 3 korbanos, one of which is a korban chatas. Does he tell you what animal? Again, it's a kizba. Yeah.
For Avodah Zarah.
You're talking about the parahel and double tzibur.
Well, this is a personal.
Oh, a personal. It's an individual violated Avodah Zarah. What, the shogeg? I assume the shogeg. That's a fair assumption. So he brings a korban chatos.
Very easy.
So he brings a seira, I guess, a female goat. And instead, he was mafresh zocher. Just the reverse of what we've been discussing. So he quotes the Rambam, and the Rambam says that for some reason, in this case, we don't apply migu. I mean, that itself is tzarchi and gadol. Why is that so? I mean, it gets even more difficult when you read the next 5 words. But before we get to that, so the Rambam is telling us that it's one thing to be mafresh a nekeva where you need a zocher, but it's another case, a whole other story if you're mafresh a zocher where you need a nekeva. But I suspect, 1 second. So Steve, did they tell you other, like a classic korban chat? The person violated Shabbos, the shogeg. What does he bring in that case?
It's also.
Say it again.
Okay.
Oh, every single chatos is in a keva?
No, I mean,
is there an alternative situation where you can bring a zochar?
Personal one. Unless they're very specific.
Oh, Kohen Gadol or Nasi.
They're the only ones that would.
And what do they bring?
Then they would bring. But it would be
Only a zochar. There's no 2 choices.
There's not.
So the Kohen Gadol or a Nasi, that chatas has to be a zochar. So I don't know what the Rambam would say in that case if he was mafresh and a nekeva. Our cases where he needed a nekeva and he was mafresh a zochar, like a nazir or a mitzora or any classic chat. See, what I'm trying to put my finger on is the Rambam distinguishing between a nekeva when he needed a zochar as opposed to a zochar when he needed a nekeva? or is the Rambam separating chatos from the cases of Osham and Olam? It could be that the Rambam, he's not separating chatos from Ola and Shlomin, Ola and Osham. He's just looking for a case where you need a nekeva, so therefore he mentions chatos. But he's not singling out chatos because of the unique nature of a korban chatos within the constellation of various categories of zvachim. He's just pointing out that in the case of chatos, we have a pumfaket, we have a requirement in the opposite direction of a nekeva, and he was mafresh azov. And the Ravid disagrees. The Ravid says that what difference does it make whether you mafresh a nekeva instead of a zachar or a zachar instead of a nekeva? We're going to apply the principle of bigu denachta, which means that it generates a kedusha saguf with various nafkaminas. But now he writes, "V'gam eino kodesh b'kedusha damin." How do you make any sense out of that? The alternative to bigu denachta is kedusha damin. Now he's saying you end up with what, zilch? It's nothing. Again, a man was mafresh, let's say a nazi, right, or a person who violated the Shabbos, right? He was mafresh a zachar instead of a nekeva. So what are you telling me? That maybe he's saying it's a toe. Yeah, but I don't know if there's such a thing as hegdish toes. Oh, there. We're in good company. You see, Kufayin Hey, Re'e b'chazonish, Shetama b'zeh, Madua enom kidochim v'kedushas damin. We had a machlokas Reb Shimon and Chacham whether you accept bigu in the case where he's mafresh and a cave for another. But Kuliyamal Pligi, even Reb Shimon agreed that it's kedushas damin. I mean, nobody said that it dissipates into the air, and it's zil, doesn't register at all. The question is do you go beyond kedushas damin and enter into the terrain of kedushas haguf? But there was never a question about kedushas damin, basic kedusha. And now we're saying that there's no kedusha at all, even as far as damin. I don't know, John, if you have a chance to open up a Rambam at the beginning of Hilchas Tmura, Perak Aleph, Alocha Chaf Aleph. Then he quotes another Rambam in Psulei HaMukdashim, Perak Dalet Alocha Yud Ches. I'm not sure, this might require a great deal of research. But if the Chazon Ish doesn't understand this Rambam, then what should we say? Okay, now he gets to a sugya called Mosros. Okay. All right, so we'll try to start the sugya Mosros. I mean, I feel bad for David because, the first part of this we went pretty smooth, but now he's getting into really heavy Kodshim sugyas, which is, I don't want to say it's beyond the purview of a general hakdama. I mean, our purpose was just to get familiar with concepts in Kodshim. We'll see if we can make any sense around Mosros. So let's just skip this little paragraph for a moment, and we'll jump ahead to Mosar Chatos Ketzar. Begone. Shehef hifrish shtei sibure mos liachrayus chatosim. So the man took what's called a neder, and he said, "Harei alai chatos." That doesn't make sense because chatos is not bob and a double. Just 1 second, I just want to check this out of my mind. Oh, I see. He was mafresh a korban chatos, and then he had a backup. What do I mean by a backup? In event that this chatos gets lost, it will be replaced by a second chatos, which will be purchased from these domin. Do you follow what's going on here? So he designates money for the purchase of a replacement chatos. Okay? How many piles of money did he designate? Stein. So that's called Shtei Tzibure Mos.
The Rambam, tomorrow where I'm looking, Perik.
Perik Aleph Halacha Chaf Aleph. Again, I'm not 100% sure you'll find it there, but if you see a Hasagas arriving, that's a good sign that you're in the right place, because he quotes two different Rambams here. So I don't know. But John, give me a minute just to finish if you hold on for a minute. Don't get lost. Hold on to the Rambam. But I just want to understand Shtei Tzibure Mos Lechatos. Lachrayus Chatos. Now, exactly why he did such a thing, that baffles my mind. But let's just accept it, as a given. For some reason, he was mafresh 2 piles of coins, and he could have gotten away with 1 pile because each pile has enough mos in it to purchase a korban chatos, an event that he needs to buy the chatos for a kapara. But he, for some unknown reason, wanted to have a spare, and he sets up another tzibur of mos, v'niskaper bi'achas min. So he chooses one of these 2 tziburim, buys himself a chatos, and he brought the korban chatos. What's the status of the other tzibur? He was mafresh 2 tziburim. He only needed 1. But he's designated both as achrayus chatos. Now he already was miskaper, and he fulfilled his personal obligation of chatos with one of the 2 tziburim. He's left with a pile of money that's been earmarked for a chatos, but he's not chayav a chatos. So what's the status of these domin? And this is what's called mosar chatos.
Tzibur means that it's his own money.
Tzibur means a pile.
That's not
Like, usually what you do is, you have coins, you pile one on top of the other. Now, Rabbosai, in the past, we have mentioned a concept called, right, there are 4 categories of karbonos, right? We have chatos, osham, ola, and shlomim, correct? Shlomim is a very general concept, but it's shlomim. It's shlomim, right? I mean, in the case of Pesach, it's a little different because Pesach has within it a latent kedusha shlomim. But in a general, shlomim are shlomim. Of the 4, I'll quiz you, so to speak. Which of the 4 is generic? Kind of, it's like a fallback. If it doesn't fit into any of the other 3 categories, it fits into that category. Ola. Why? Because Ola is always Bob in a dove. So whenever I have an issue about when this carbon should be directed for X, Y, or Z, then let it be Zayin and Ola. Ola is kind of a dafka because of the chumra of Ola, because Ola is kulei kolel on the mizbeach. So in any event, so whenever you see monies that have not clearly been designated for X, a particular carbon, then we'll call it an olas nedam. We'll earmark that money as a voluntary carbon ola. And that's what we're going to apply to the case of Mosar Chatas. So what do we do with Mosar Chatas? We purchase an olas nedam.
What's Chagiga? Shlomim?
Hagiga, I think, is a shlom. I mean, ask me in about a month when we study Hagiga. I'll be a little smarter. But here's the deal. We now have something called chatos psulos. Now, normally, chatos psulos mesos, that's our local Moshe Misina. There are 5 categories of disqualified chatos, 5 different categories that you just have to let the animal die. But beyond those 5 categories, like a classic case of chatos mesos would be if Ruvain was mafresh a carbon, then he died, and he never got a chance during his lifetime to bring the carbon. So that is a chatos mesos. But there are other psulim that don't fit under those 5 categories. And now the question is the following. Chatos hapsula lekarbon, the ofen shelo nemar bahen misa. We're now on page test, so it doesn't fit into the one of the 5 categories. Halach l'moshe v'sina chatos hamesos. Harein roos achis tavu v'yiplu dmeim li'olah. Okay, that's very fascinating. What does that have to do with anything that we've been discussing? Just like we were talking about Mosar Chatos. Oh, I see. You know, once I'm not exactly sure why pedagogically he decided to add this, but I think he's talking about the concept that we mentioned before, that the fallback position is always going to be an ola, because an ola is like a generic kind of a carbon, a category of carbon that can tolerate even an adava under any circumstance. I could bring, or for example, let's say he violated a mitzvah's essay. It's not like a chatos, which is specific. You know, you violated one of the 36 chayve creases, you know, so you bring a chatos in shogig, right? Here, he didn't take a lulav on sukkahs, so he brings an ola. So ola, is, as I said before, so where does this happen after Kabina? So first of all, we have Mosar Chatos, when he has an extra pile of money that was designated for Achrayis for Chatos, he'll use that money to purchase an Ola. And now we have a case of a Chatos Psula. Now, in the case of a Chatos Psula, again, I'm not sure exactly why he mentions Chatos. You know, I would have said the same thing in an Osham or even in Shlomim, but for some reason unknown to me, he mentions Dafka Chatos. Anyway, the Chatos became disqualified. And here's where the carbon Ola again surfaces. What he does is, he takes this Chatos and he gets to the point where he could be Podeh the Chatos. How does he get to that point? So the carbon is right now a tam. He has to get to the point where it's a balmum, and that's called yirad shiyistan. So he sends it out to the pasture. The animal swallows a nail and becomes a balas mum. Now it can be poded. What does he do with the money of a carbon chatos that was now subject to lend itself to pidyon? The money should be earmarked for a carbon ola. It's very strange. He started with what? A chatos. He ends up with an ola. In both of these cases, in the case of Mozart chatos, we have the extra money that was designated for a chatos, he will use it for an ola. And in the case of a chatos shenifsala, again, it's not a chatos hamesos, chatos shenifsala, one of the other psulim, not one of the 5 categories, and he takes the chatos, he does a pigeon, and the money goes to a carbon. It's really fascinating. You started with chatas and you ended up with ola. Now, again, I'm going to continue, and then I'll ask to go back to the opening paragraph because we have to get ourselves a little bit more oriented. Mosar Asham. Again, I'm going to assume with just covering over the text here that again Mosar Asham should be like Mosar Chatas. He designated 2 piles of coins for his Asham. He used one, purchased an Asham, it was Miskaper, and now he's left with another pile. That's called Mosar Asham, and that should be designated to buy a carbon ola. Let's see if we're right. Ifrish mos la shamo, v'lokach ben hashamo, v'nitoser min amos. Oh, okay, so that's a simpler case. I don't know why in the case of Chatas he didn't mention this case. Instead, he designated 2 tziburin. I don't know why he had to do such a thing. Here we're talking about a case where he overpaid, so to speak. Right? He overestimated the value of the carbon. He thought he was going to go to the shuk, go out to the marketplace and purchase an asham at 100. And it turned out he got a cheap deal, and he was able to secure the carbon asham at 80. So he has now a surplus of 20. Okay, so it's, in my humble opinion, this is identical to a Mosar Chatos. Again, he's being very consistent, and he's saying, when will we have a situation in which he was mafresh a carbon as an asham, but yet at the end of the day, we're going to end up with a carbon ola, and that's a case where the asham became pasul. We were poded, and the money is earmarked for a carbon ola. Again, I don't know if I can be medayik in his language. I hear he used the language the double. I mean, in the previous paragraph, he was also talking about in the double. Was he not? And if there's a fundamental difference between the two, please, if somebody could explain it, because I don't see why. Kuf pay. Let's just see what he has here. Oh, okay. So he goes back to that Mishnah of Mafresh Nekevel Yashom. This is Chapra in the next paragraph. Right, we have 5 categories of chatos. That, let's say, for example, a man was mafresh a chatos and then he died never before he got a chance to bring the chatos. Is be asham, if there was a similar case of an asham, the man was obligated in carbon asham, he was mafresh a carbon asham, he died. Is halach is not mesa, because that's halach l'moshe b'sinai in chatos, but in other karbanos, roa. Roa means we wait till get some moon, and then we're poded. Lefichach osham shemesu baila. Oh, this is exactly our case that we mentioned. He was mafresh carbon osham, and then never he died. Oh, shekibru baila. Somehow he achieved a kapara for that same avera, that avon that generated a chi of asham. He achieved its kapara elsewhere, either with another carbon or some other method by which he achieved kapara. So what does he do now with the carbon asham? Carbon asham is not ba b'nidava. There's no such thing as a voluntary carbon asham. Either yachai or yirachai. But now he had the kapara through another means. He brought a different carbon, and now he's stuck with a carbon asham that stares him in the face, doesn't allow him to do a pidyon, is roa. Roa means we're going to allow you to do a pigeon. How can you do a pigeon on a korban acham? The answer is roa. We wait till it gets a move, and once the move is psulim mizbeach and psulim mizbeach lend themselves to pigeon. Now, what are we going to do with the money? And I'm going to assume that we earmark it for a korban olah. Let's see. Lefichach asham shemesu b'alam esos harei asham zel l're'iyah u'li'achar she'yipol bo mum v'yifteh damav li'olah. Good. Now, Rabbi, just to wrap things up for today, let's go back to the paragraph that we skipped, and hopefully now we'll be oriented. Moshos chatos v'yasham shaninu b'mishnah v'huva b'gemara ze medrash dorash Yehoyada HaKohen. HaKohen probably means he was a Kohen Gadol, and he was a big Talmud Chacham, and he had a medrash, he had a drasha. Asham, who Asham, Hashem Lashem. Asham who? Asham Lashem. Will you have a chumash there by Yikra? If you could just make sure that I'm reading the pasuk properly. Vayikra hey pasuk yutes. Here's where we could use a Torah Tzvim, but anyway. Asham hu, Asham Lashem. That's what it says. How do you translate that? There's some extra words in this pasuk.
The guilt offering, he has become guilty before Hashem.
All right, he's not translating the same word twice because it would sound stupid in the translation. But in the Hebrew, it says Asham. Lahavi is a ribui. Kol dora babi mosa chatos v'ashamos. Again, all of a sudden we're introducing a chatos here into the equation. The Torah, the pasuk is addressing an asham. Is likach b'dom of olos. Now, what's habasar? You want to read the pasuk? It's apparently there's more to the pasuk than just. No. I guess my mistake. It's not in the pasuk. Habasar l'shem the oros l'kohen.
Is the other.
What does that mean? Habasar Hashem. You understand this, David? What does it mean? Habasar Hashem.
It's the island. It's for the basar.
Oh, he's just telling you what an olah. Oh, he's just. I see. He's just summarizing the laws of an olah. I guess because the drasha appears in the Gemara, so he quotes the drasha in its entirety. That Moser Chatos ve'Hashamos, we take the damim and we buy an olah. Now, once we buy an olah, then we have a regular classic olah, which is basal that basal l'mizbeach and oros l'kohen. See, he doesn't mention here in this paragraph in the drasha of Yehoyada the halach of Yirad Sheyistayim, because he's going to mention that in the later part. We're smart, we're chachamim because we already learned the next paragraph. Here in this paragraph, he just gives you the general drasha without going into the detail. It just says likach b'dam of olos. But you have to wait until it has a mum. Yirad she is started. Let's make a note of where we got up to. Nechluku Tanoim. Is that where we got up to? I just want to make one last comment. What I find very paradoxical. The man was, let's say, in the case of Motzer Chatos, right? He has a tzibur mos, which he designated as a Christ for Chatos. Or, for example, Mosar Osham, right? He was Mafrich Mos Lat Shomo, and Lokach Me'em Hashomo. He purchased a carbon Osham. Now he's got extra money. So if he has extra money, that money was not designated for an Osham. I mean, he may have, right, L'chatchila up front, he didn't know that he would have this extra money. But in the case of Mosar Chatos, I mean, again, he sets up a pile of money for achrayus for a carbon Chatos. And now we're going to purchase a carbon ola. Is it his personal? What would you say? Just give me a knee-jerk response, intuitive. Is it his personal ola? Right? He had designated as a chatos. Chatos is my personal chatos. No one can take that away from me. And in the next paragraph, which Rich Shem will do tomorrow, he says, no, it goes for an olas tzibur. Why does it go for an olas tzibur? That this is my chatos. How can you rob me of my chatos? Okay, let me just.
He's done the chatos from the first part.
Correct.
So
But it's his money. It's coming out of his bank account. You know, why are you stealing it from him? I don't get it.